Okay, so since on the last video I spoke about history and how I wanted to make a video on that subject, this is what this video is going to be all about. I hope everyone is doing great, having a good day. It's a beautiful day out today. So let's talk about our true history. And I'm not going to be making any wild claims here that I know what that is, because that would be silly and unwise to proclaim such things and such knowing, because this is a question that nobody really knows the real answer to it as it stands currently, right now. And let me elaborate on that, because a lot of people might listen to this and be like, "Oh, you're crazy, you know. I mean, everything, you know, we know our history." Well, not really. We know the things that have been written, things that were put in writing, right? And then we have a general idea based on that, assuming that all that was written about us and our past is correct. But how do we know? How do we really know? How do we find out? Well, I'm going to give you some food for thought on that, okay? So bear with me. There has been so much suppression about our true history for as long as we have been around. It's not even funny. Where do I even begin? Well, I would suggest you to take a deep look at institutions like the Smithsonian and the things that have been kept and hidden from us for the last couple hundred years, that have been found throughout history in archaeological digs and things that, like that. Because I can assure you that everything that something is found that defies logical explanation or the status quo of what we have been told about human evolution and how long human beings have been around on this earth and all of that stuff. Everything something is found, it is immediately suppressed and taken care of, and either going into obscurity or completely disappearing from the records. And then we never ever hear from it again. And that's insane, in my opinion. The fact that most of us are okay with that, nobody ever does anything about it, and we don't demand some answers for some of the questions that have been around for a while, it's crazy. Yeah, I know. We're all worried with our own lives and paying the bills, keeping a roof over our heads, right? But did you ever think about the repercussions of something like this? Like, we don't even know our true history. We don't know a lot. We know that there have been some major cataclysms in a not so distant past when it comes down to what happened globally speaking. We know that there has been a flood of some kind that has killed a lot of people. There's also been a mud flood, but who's to say that this mud flood wasn't related to this flood that all, sacred scriptures talk about in different religions across the board? Like, we don't know if these two things were two separate events or if they were one and the same. There's the whole Tartaria rabbit hole that a lot of people are parroting and talking about it these days, and that the YouTube algorithm seems to love and push. And I will tell you one thing, and that's my personal stance on it, okay? This whole thing with Tartaria that a lot of people like to talk about, you should be highly skeptical about things like that, because if the algorithm is pushing things like that and it's getting hundreds of thousands of views, there's something shady about this whole thing. And look, I'm not denying that there has been. This is what I think about this whole thing. I think that in a not so distant past, there was this universal knowledge and understanding from the population around the world that existed at the time, where they shared the same understanding when it comes down to architecture and building design. And this is why there are these buildings all over the place that are very similar in style and how they look, even though they might be in completely different places throughout the globe, different cultures, different everything. So, assuming that everyone was spiritually evolved and at the same level, it only makes sense that, they would be building things in a similar manner. I don't think that there was one single civilization that had it all and did it all. That doesn't make any sense to me. But I could be wrong. Who knows? And maybe, maybe, maybe the whole world was like one thing back then. And this is why things were like that. But why do we have to have a name? Like Tartaria, and then make that be the narrative. Like I said, when there's a big narrative surrounding something like that, we should have quite a few grain of salts on the thinking process of it. And that's just the way I look at it. And I bought into that for a while, personally. I'm not ashamed to say it. But then when I started looking at it more deeply, I was like, I don't know about this. So, everyone is free to believe whatever they want to believe, right? But I would be skeptical of things like that are being pushed by the algorithm so hard, like it's the truth. So yeah, we know there have been these things, the mud flood, the flooding, and then there is also the how there are these hundreds, maybe there might be thousands, I don't know the number, I never really looked into it that deeply, but there are multiple hundreds of necropolis all over the world. And if you don't know what a necropolis is, go look it up. Look it up on YouTube. Do some Googling, look it up on Wikipedia, whatever you want to use as your source of your information, AI, whatever. Always have some grains of salt when it comes down to AI answers. That's the other thing. I've talked about this quite a bit recently. But there is a lot of irrefutable proof that thousands of people have died not that long ago, and their bones are underground on all of these necropolis. And most of these places are off limits to the general population. People are not allowed in. Even for archaeological research, it's limited. It's on a need-to-know basis type of thing, and they pick who they want to be allowed to go into these places when people are trying to do real historical research. So why is it that they're hiding these things from the general public? We should all be asking ourselves these questions. Why is it that in the 1800s there have been thousands of skeletons found that were like 9 feet tall, in some cases even a little bit bigger than that, and all that stuff has disappeared? There are very few of such skeletons around in museums today that prove that there have been bigger humans here before us, and they were different than us. They had 6 fingers, 6 toes, 2 rows of teeth. Nobody talks about these things, but if you bother to do your own research, you're gonna find out that this is real and it happened, and there are still, archaeological artifacts that survive to prove these things. Then there is the fact that talking about the skeletons and stuff. I don't know why I lost my line of thought. Let me go back here a little bit. So there's the mounds. There are so many pyramids all over the place that are covered today in every single country, that there's thousands of pyramids across the world. But most people only talk about the pyramids in Egypt and then some of the ones in South America, and stuff. But there have been pyramids that have been discovered in the United States all over the place. There are tons of pyramids in China that nobody talks about because China suppresses that information. And the list goes on. The list goes on. So our history is very, very muddy, to say the least, and there's a huge amount of suppression, misinformation, fabricated lies, manipulation. Then there's the whole thing with the Gnostic texts and the real Gnostic knowledge that also has been completely removed from the canon scriptures, right? Where they talk about the real story of creation and the eons, and they talk about Sophia and the being that she created by herself, that's supposed to be this God that everybody believes in, that is not the real God. There's so much stuff, guys. You gotta do your own research. I'm not gonna be the one here to tell you all the stuff, as much as I like to talk about these things, because it would take so many videos to talk about these things, and there's plenty of content creators out there that have dedicated their content to specifically just those subjects, which is great. So if you're curious about these things, go look it up. I highly recommend you look up some of that stuff. The true God, the Gnostics, the Pleroma, and all of these things. It's fascinating. I love that stuff. But I do that on my own time, and you should too. And then you have the Vatican and all the things that they hide from everybody, and nobody can access that stuff, and it's extremely controlled. And then, did you know that we, at some point in a not so distant past, we had 13 months in a year? And there is a zodiac sign that was the 13th sign that was called, I think it's Ophiuchus or something like that. It's PH, and it was the snake sign. And that got cut, that got removed, and then they shortened, the year to 12 months. And this is why we have leap years every once in a while. Why were some of these things completely removed from our history, and most people don't even know about these things anymore? Why? Who makes these decisions, and why? Those are the questions we should be asking. Why have these things been done? What are they trying to hide? Our history is extremely shady, to say the least. Human history in general, and where do we come from? There's the whole Anunnaki thing, there's the whole Bible thing, there's the whole monkey thing, and I don't think any of these things are true 100%. There might be a little bit of truth in all of them, but you see, that's why we have to be critical and use our own brain to analyze things, and then do our own research, and then research it. Like, if you really want to research, do serious research, and don't just ask AI and then take that as face value and that's the truth. There's a lot of real historical stuff that you can look for on books that still exist, older books, And this is what I would recommend. You know, I used to spend a lot of time in libraries when I was young. It was my favorite thing to do. When I was in my teens, I spent 3 hours a day in a library sometimes, just doing stuff like that in the school because I loved that kind of stuff. Yeah, this is really all I wanted to talk about, and it comes down to the history side of things and how there is a lot that we don't know, and we should be asking a lot of questions, and we should be trying to figure out what really happened. But one thing is for certain, they're keeping a lot of stuff under wraps and suppressing a lot of stuff because whatever it is that goes against the grain and what is the narrative is suppressed. And this is really all I wanted to say today. If you like the content, like, share, subscribe to give the channel more reach. I love you all. Never stop loving yourself. And I'll catch you all on the next one. Take care, my friends.